Light the beam, because it's time for Nerdy for 30, podcast where we talk about nerdy-ish movies for 30-ish minutes. My name is Kevin Bauer, aka The Critic's Choice. Not with me today is Tim Keck, aka The People's Champ. Tim could not be here for this recording. He's got something good cooking, though, so keep your eyes peeled for that. In Tim's place, we had to call in the big guns. You know her, you love her, but not as much as I do. It's Lauren Moore. Lauren, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me in our home.
Yeah. Thank you for being where you live.
It's truly the least I could do.
Yeah, really. Yeah, this is weird. We just had a recording get interrupted, but it's so strange to be effectively just like having a conversation, but on mic. So, it's going to be a little bit odd to navigate, but I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, a little peek into what a normal Tuesday night is like for us, I feel like.
Yeah.
Affecting whatever things we are watching and liking and all that jazz. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, come on in. So this one, Turning Red, today we're talking about Turning Red, which they re-released in theaters. It's one of the 3 Pixar movies that came out during the pandemic that never got a theatrical release. It's really nice that they're doing the theatrical release for this. One of the biggest things we talked about, though, is that it doesn't feel like anybody's really promoting this. Maybe we just haven't been looking in the right areas. I personally haven't gotten served any ads for this. Like, if we weren't watching for Pixar stuff, I don't think we would have noticed this.
Yeah, the only reason, I knew it was happening and then I didn't know when and if it was now. And the only reason I knew it was now is because I follow the director, Domi Shi, on Instagram and she posted about it. And I was like, oh, that's literally now. So I had, as a fan, wanted to go do this and I've already missed Soul. So yeah, get out there, folks. Look for it. Go because it's worth it.
Yeah, go see it. If you're listening to this on Thursday morning, it might legitimately be your last chance to see it in theaters. Yeah. So, pull it up. Fire up your Regal Movie Pass. Get the most out of that $23.50 a month. Of the 3 movies, so Soul was there January. I think Luca's going to be up in March. Mm-hmm. And then this one's up in February. Personal opinion, I think Turning Red is the best of all 3. This is just a phenomenal movie.
I like them all, but yeah, it's my personal favorite. And it definitely strikes a chord personally that I can heavily relate to since it's about being a girl in the early 2000s and transitioning into tweendom, teenage womanhood, whatever. So extremely relatable.
For sure. And it's if you weren't a girl in the early 2000s, I feel like there's still a lot there. Obviously there are specifics that play specifically to you and the women in the theater with us. Everybody was dying, the whole movie.
Yeah.
And there's so much of this movie that does kind of feel like a Pixar version of Pin 15. And I mean that as a high compliment.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They're both mining that same thing. The moment where May's notebook gets shown to the clerk at the gas station and she's drawn that insanely cringeworthy mermaid drawing of him. It's so fucking real. It's such a great detail.
Yeah. Or I mean, just not even it being shown, but the way it shows her doing it in the first place of and just the sharp jump of 1 second you're drawing just whatever, cute little bunnies or something. And then the next you're oh, what is this feeling? And then you explore it. And the way she rolls under the bed is all of it. This movie is full of so much physical comedy. Mm-hmm. But it's just a delight. It's just if you're not laughing at something that they're saying or a lyric in the music in the background, which I heard a few this time I didn't catch the first time around that really stuck out and was that was very funny. The physical comedy alone and the animation of everything is just, it's so good. And it's unique and it's new. And what I love about it, especially, is that it's so different from other Pixar movies. It's just very refreshing.
It's incredible. It really, truly has its own personality. It's definitely, in my opinion, the funniest of the Pixar movies. Again, people were just cracking up the entire time.
Yeah.
I feel like they tapped into, I feel like they kind of pushed the character models so that they're not all the way your stereotypical like Pixar character models. Like I feel like they're really like a lot of personality in there. And then with that physical comedy and stuff, it feels like they found a unique way to tap into the references for I think Domi Shi and the other animators with like, 90s anime. And like it felt spiritually like it was kind of like drawing from the same place as when you see adaptations of Scott Pilgrim and other things that were made by people
Mhm.
that like really enjoyed comics and art. And I meant to look this up. I know there was an anime or a manga in the 90s called Ranma One Half that I think is about somebody turning into a panda. Like somebody turns into a normal panda. Um, and I think that was like I definitely want to look more into that because I think there's like, I don't know, some cool influences potentially being drawn there. But like,
Yeah. Well,
God,
I
with
did watch the Disney, like on Disney Plus, they have the Embracing the Panda like documentary.
Mhm.
And they did talk about how anime was like definitely a huge influence because it was something that they loved to do when they were this age. So they mentioned, I don't remember any of the names of them, but like certain mangas and things that they read. So very possible that that's one of them. I don't know.
I could see it. And like you see when the ants are like jumping into action at the end, it's all very like comic book splash page, like people leaping into action. It's super, super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just really fun, and I like that it is incorporating these elements that being explored more, like within recent entertainment history with like Scott Pilgrim, and of course, any Spider Verse movie is doing a lot of playing on that type of thing. But this is still different from those, and it's still its own thing, which I really appreciate.
For sure. Were there any physical comedy moments on that topic that stood out to you that were especially hilarious? Outside, I know you mentioned her rolling out of the bed when she was doing the
That
real
one
life
was a
fan
big
art.
one for me. That was so funny. And I mean, there's so many to pull from just off the top of my head. I mean, I love the intro of her being this confident nerd and the way we are introduced to her and the way she walks, the way she hops around, her
Ah.
like sassy like neck movements and head movements, which also takes me to another. I love her friend Priya, who is very like stone cold serious, but when she moves, she does these incredible like head side to side movements where the rest of her body is like really stiff. And like I that had to be really hard to do because there's like certain things like in animation that are really tough to do, which is like keeping somebody still but also keeping them alive, and making sure that like certain pixels are moving so it doesn't look just like a frozen model with like
Mm.
just the head moving. So for them to accomplish that and have it be so snappy with her neck and her head was super funny. There's yeah, tons. Like the whole movie is just full of them. It's one after the other.
I loved the one in the bathroom. I think it's the first time she turns into the red panda at school, and she's in the bathroom, and one of the girls comes out of the stall and sees her and freezes in shock. And then May puts her panda head on the girl's forehead and pushes backward, but the
Her
girl as
hand.
one thing. Oh yeah, sorry. Her puts her panda hand on the girl's forehead and pushes her backwards. And the girl slides back like she's frozen in carbonite. Like she just slides back as one block. But I was watching that just because you from like doing animation classes and stuff like have mentioned how difficult it is for people to hold a pose. I was watching for that anytime they did something where somebody was stiff, and I noticed that there is still very subtle like clothing
Mhm.
movement and things like that.
Yes. I noticed that too. That was like a way I feel that they were able to do it is to make the clothes kind of move a little bit and like, you can show that they're breathing and stuff like that or other ways. But like just I mean, obviously Pixar masterclass at like doing that and making these hilarious like physical comedy moments where they just react to stuff in such a exaggerated funny way. It's very explosive a lot of the times, and it's also, like, very of, like, preteen, tween girl, like, just so, for lack of a better word, like, emotional, but in the best way, just very, like, height of every emotion all at once, and just, like, getting them all, like, within you in a moment's notice, and then just exploding with all of them, like, it's and then hopping between them. It's amazing.
Oh my God, yeah. And it's what being a preteen felt like too, or like being just right around that age of like 12, 13. Like you just feel like you're gonna explode. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. Any other, let's do some beefs and thieves. Let's get into I feel like we're gonna have more thieves than beefs. So let's start off with the thieves.
Yeah.
Um we talked about the physical comedy. What are some other big thieves for you in this movie?
Thieves,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this earlier because it was like, how do I even narrow it down to one?
You can do
There's so
multiple.
many. So yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do multiple. One is the box of kittens being the
Oh my
ultimate
God.
test of her emotion and like being able to control the inner panda. Um, that was so funny. The like rolling under the bed, like discovering like feelings of like, drawing sexy drawings and everything, like so funny. Um, and I mean, I could just, I don't know. There's so many little things, little pieces and parts, but then also just like the undercurrent, like the total story in general is a thief in and of itself because of like how it manages to be so playful and fun and like make light of that time in your life, but also address it head on and be really sincere too. And like, I laughed, but I also cried. And I remembered, it plays on like relationships with your parents and that sort of thing. And just like perfectionism, all things that I can relate to. So
Mhm.
it is, and the journey she goes through at the end to kind of decide like, is this something that I'm going to get rid of because literally everyone in my family has? Or am I going to be like the first ancestor who got this in the first place and see it as a gift and embrace it? And like how scary that feels to embrace something that everyone in your family is trying to like push aside, and you don't have much of an example of what it looks like if you forge this new path, and you just have to kind of do it and take that leap of faith. um it was just it's really encouraging. It's a very inspiring movie in that way.
Definitely. And I think structurally the story is awesome. It's so well done.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever feel formulaic. I feel like as I was watching the movie for the first time and even last night, knowing what was going to happen, I never felt like I was bound in by those structural constraints. And yet I feel like it really shines. It gives you so much perspective on all the different characters' opinions, background on why they behave the way that they do. And man, it gets so much done.
That reminds me of another thief, is her dad, because he's a really good example of that too, where we don't see very much of him and he's pretty quiet, but we still do get a really good few scenes of him and his perspective and like what his deal is. And I love the scene or like the shots of him cooking and
Yeah.
the
Oh,
food.
yeah.
It makes me so hungry every time. It's like it's really beautiful. Like it's like I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I don't feel like I've seen anything quite like this. Like I know Ratatouille has done like some really beautiful like things with food too, but like this was still different and I really loved it. Um and I just like I think he is like a really good muted character that is actually, he's muted, but he's also very important. And what they're able to do with him with very little is really impressive.
Yeah. Even just little moments like him stealing the donut on the counter. Like you
Mhm.
just get little hints at who this guy is. And then when he finally does have that monologue where he talks about uh, her mom and her grandma not approving of him, it's really sweet. It's a nice little moment.
Very tender.
Yeah. Uh, the story thing I was gonna say too, her coming back, the mom coming back as like a giant version of the red panda is such an awesome way to kind of bring back all of the threads. Like she is a physical manifestation of all of the threads that have been threats in May's life this entire time. And she's doing something that is consistent with the character, which is what she's done the entire time, where she finds somewhere that May is having a good time and she busts her way into it and breaks in. It was incredible because, like, I always come back to the thing somebody pointed at Ghostbusters as like the perfect example of how to introduce a character into a script. Because when you see every major character in Ghostbusters, they are doing exactly what they're going to be doing the entire time. Like you were introduced to everybody with a little mini thesis statement about who they are. And it's done so quickly and so succinctly. Um, it's great. Like they do that with her fully. And it's just so over the top, but it's over the top in such a fun way. And like, I mean, it really feels like they paid it off after like they built to it, you know, like they didn't show like a giant massive thing at the beginning. They waited until our disbelief had been suspended for the entire movie before they showed us like a 200-foot tall version of the panda or however big she is.
Yeah. Well, and that leads me to another thing I want to mention about her as a character in general too, is that like along with everything else we've said about this standing out and differentiating itself from other Pixar movies, I feel like she's a much more well-rounded mom character than some of the other ones that they've done. So that was very refreshing. You
Yeah.
know, she's not just mom. Like there's so much depth to her and there's so much going on with her. And they don't do like the jokes that I'm getting kind of sick of, where it's like, I'm a mom, but I can also kick ass or
Yeah.
something like that. That just has gotten kind of old. She's such a fun character, and what they allow her to be in like her design with her like sharp shoulders and like stuffiness and everything. But then when you see her and like her, I don't know if it's supposed to represent like her inner child or what, but when they go into that like panda realm and you see her comforting her mom as like a little girl, and then you watch her slowly grow up, and she starts off with her hair like long and loose and kind of just like, and she gets stiffer and tighter, and like that tells the story too. It tells you so much about her as a character, and it's just like there's so many little parts like that, that again, like for as much humor and comedy as there is in this, there's so much heart too. And like that, the scene where she's like watching soap operas with her mom is just like
Mm.
really touching. And then I also really love the scene in the car where you like, I don't think May says very much, but you can just see in the way that they act it out where they're next to each other, and like her mom is like um kind of like recapping like her version of how that went, and like, thank goodness I'm here and you're safe and you're my little girl. And you can just see May like, again, she's not saying anything, but you know what she's thinking of, like, how do I balance like being what my mom sees in this reality that my mom's painting right now versus like how it affected me and my experience of it and what I want. And now I'm heading into a future where I become an adult and I make my own decisions. And what happens to these two ideas? Do I
Mhm.
have to pick one or the other? Can they coexist? What do I do? And like that also is so, again, very relatable. So it's just, oh, it's there's so much richness and depth to this movie that I think it is rewatchable on a level of you can just pull whatever you want to get out of it from it each watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, on that note, do you think that the mom's size as a panda was related to the amount of emotions that she had swallowed over the years?
Oh, that could be. Yeah, I was curious about it because they do really emphasize that she's so big, and they kind of downplay it. They're like, yeah, 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 she's so big, but then the big reveal that she's just like ginormous.
Yeah.
Like I wonder why her, and you see all the aunties and like everybody else, and they're not nearly as big. And yeah, I'm curious what that could be. I don't know if like her character was the one to like maybe immigrate from China to Canada. So maybe that's like a whole added level of like internalized like emotion and feeling. Um, but I don't know, because that I don't know if that happened like before or after she turned red or I don't know. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, or if it's just like or maybe she like embodied all of the like internalized like generational like things that go through each generation, all the emotion, all the pent up feelings and
Mm.
everything, And then she's also not only taking on everything that came behind her, but then she's so protective of May and
Yeah.
so that it goes forward too. So it's like not only the past, but the future. And then May is like pretty small and cute and cuddly by comparison. So, and she's the one that decides to embrace it. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's how well they embrace the panda. And the more you embrace it, the more like livable with it it can be. But maybe her mom is so opposed to it and so like, we need to be perfect, we need to be, it's maybe that level of pressure and perfection that like, I don't think it ever occurred to her to keep the panda. So maybe that has something to do with it too. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see it. It's interesting. I'm not sure whether she is, they never clarify whether she is the oldest daughter, the youngest daughter, or somewhere in between. It seems like maybe she's the youngest. So I feel like oldest or youngest in a big family like that would tend to get most of the pressure put on them. Um, so yeah, it could be, or maybe it could just be she could be somewhere in the middle, but she just reacted differently to her mom. Like she just ended up having a different relationship with her mom. But
It could also just be like a representation of her strength overall. Like, yes, she's dealing with all of these things too, but I feel like that's kind of how they present it as like, your mom's strong and she's a fighter. Like, you should have seen her panda. Like, so maybe it has something to do with that too. I'm not sure.
that could be because they do mention the blow up when he said that like your mom blew up at your grandma. So it doesn't seem like she was holding in her emotion necessarily the same way that May was. Huh. It's one of those things where I feel like they obviously know and it's detailed that it's okay that it wasn't in the movie. Like the movie is not harmed by the fact that there isn't like like a 10-minute sit down where we get the exact lore dump about all this kind of stuff. Like it's fine. We have all the important things that we
Yeah,
need. It's okay that we're dealing with most of this stuff subtextually. And yet
I
like it
prefer it.
points, oh my God, absolutely. And it just gives it even more depth. Like it allows there to be more there to talk about. Again,
It allows for us to ask this question to each other and hear our interpretations. And maybe they're not what they had in mind, but they're still interesting to bounce off of each other. And I like having the option to do that for once
oh my
and not
God.
having it like spoon fed to me. So,
Yeah. Look at we were just talking about Solo the other day. Look at like Andor versus Solo, where like Andor, you're just jumping in media res to a world that's in motion. And then Solo, we are slowly getting every single thing on Han Solo's Wikipedia page spoon fed to us. And it's a more boring movie because of it. I still kind of ride for Solo. Like I kind of like that movie, but I think it would have been more interesting if we didn't see literally everything that he's known for.
yeah,
But,
I haven't seen it, but I will take your word for
oh,
it.
I thought you saw that one.
No,
Oh yeah.
you
Well,
told me about it. That's all.
I was really descriptive.
Got a strong Basil exposition in there,
Oh
huh?
yeah. Oh, big time. We have there is a new category that we've started judging for. It's something that we're thinking about adding to the Rennies. I don't necessarily think this movie has any of them. But it's the Cranberries present Did You Have to Let It Linger award for shot that went on too long.
Oh, I
I
like that.
I don't think you really get that in animation from like a good studio though, because you have to earn every single frame of a
Yeah,
shot. So like,
that's a really good point. Yeah. You can't waste any time and you cannot waste any frame. Uh yeah, I don't think there's nothing that comes to mind for that.
mm-mm.
Um I'm still trying to think if there's anything else like I know there is, and the second that we're done talking, I'm gonna be like, oh, I never got to talk about this. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I
Mm.
love the whole boy band aspect is
Oh,
so fun.
so good.
It's they nail that feeling of like being in a little small girl squad in school, and then having that fandom pop up out of nowhere, and then you are one day like whatever ambivalent about it, and then the next day obsessed, and it becomes your whole life, and it's just oh my gosh. um Oh, another thing I really loved was the colors of this movie. The colors are so beautiful, in the way that, like, her friend group, they each kind of have their own color to, like, distinguish them, but I thought it was neat that, like, the school, like Toronto outside is pretty colorful, and then when they get inside school, everything is, it's the opposite color of red. It's green. It's
Mhm.
all very muted, boring greens. And then you've got this group of beautiful weirdos, and they each have their own color that's very bright. And of course, May is like all these hues of red and orange. But they, like, color wise, stand out from all these people in their school, which I thought was like really neat. Um, and helped kind of distinguish like how that feeling in school where like everybody kind of like tries to be the same because you want to fit in and you don't want to be different, you don't want to be made fun of, but it emphasized their like confidence and their dorkiness that like, oh my gosh, I wish I had. There were times where I did, but I didn't hold on to it very long. And the peer pressure to conform really was strong, but to see them in that like beautiful moment in time where they just like embrace their own like colors and styles and weirdness and they do it together and lift each other up, it's like that girl squad at its absolute best. So yeah, that was another thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, that was awesome. The music stood out this time around too.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
Shocking.
hearing it in the theater, like I liked it at home too, but like there's something about going into a theater and like hearing that sound and like being a part of the movie and not like pausing to like get up and go to the bathroom or go get a snack or whatever. Like
Mhm.
just like being immersed in it. Like, oh, if anybody is listening and it's still time to see the movie in theaters, please, please, please do. You won't regret it.
Yeah, it was awesome. I somehow missed or maybe just like wasn't as interested last time we saw it that Billie Eilish and Phineas did the music for it, like the boy band music specifically.
Hmm.
Um, Super good, super funny. You can hear it. Like last night we
Yeah.
could hear it while the credits were going. Um, it's not a bad thing. It's really fun. It's just cool to see the two of them be able to like lock into a perfect parody of boy band stuff from the 90s.
Hmm.
And the Ludwig stuff, Ludwig Göransson did the rest of the score for it. And we commented last night how much it sounds kind of like Steven Universe. Again, I think it's a situation where they're both drawing from the same reference pool, which is cool to see how each of them interpret it because it's that kind of like that like 90s kind of funky. They got the keyboard in there, but they got a little bit of a breakbeat in it too. It's like it does feel a lot like the music that you would hear in anime from like the 90s and early 2000s and like loading screen music or like title screen music on video games. And it's
Yeah.
just neat to hear that.
It's delightful. It's a beautiful little world that you get to be a part of for a while, and
Yeah.
I love it so much.
I really don't think there's like a bad
Yeah, what
moment,
are
like
your
boring
beefs?
moment.
Because, like, my only beef I can think of is what we brought up at the start, which is that there was no marketing whatsoever for this when it was in theaters. Like, I
Yeah.
remember there being some, like, in New York on the subways, like, when it was first released on Disney Plus, but, like, that wasn't even that much, and then, like, certainly not now that it's in theaters. There's just, like it's really sad to me that, like, first of all, it wasn't released in theaters earlier,
Mhm.
and then second of all and the whole, like, there's probably, like, deeper politics and business decisions that I don't understand, but, like, I remember certain Disney movies coming out, and you had to, like, pay for them during the pandemic, and, like, this and
Oh,
other
yeah.
Pixar movies were just, like, dropped free and I don't understand that. Like I feel like this movie didn't get its like time in the sun that it deserved and that is my beef.
Wow. Yeah, that really sucks. Because I remember Onward. Onward was the first one. That one came out like I think like the Friday of the lockdown. I want to say the
Yeah.
first week of the lockdown, Onward came out. We were already feeling pretty shitty. I think maybe I want to say Animal Crossing launched like the same day or the next week or something. It was around the same time. But the only option at that time was to buy it on like iTunes or whatever, and was happy to spend that money.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like,
totally. You mentioning that is making me did they ever release that in
I
theaters?
don't
Like
think so.
that
I was
seems
going to ask you the same thing. That
yeah, because
movie
I like
rules.
that one. Yeah, it's really fun and charming, and it's like I feel like these like Pixar movies are just going to be like this weird little bubble of like forgotten movies, and it's a shame because they're like beautiful in their own ways, and this one especially is just and I mean, this is one thing I haven't really mentioned, but I feel like I have to. It's
Hmm.
very obligatory. Is that this is one of, I think it is the first Pixar movie with an all-female like lead, like executive or like lead positions, like director and all of those like producer, all of the like leadership roles on the film are all women. So that's a pretty big deal. And it
Yeah.
just feels like, of course, when that happens, like there's so many things to like keep it down. So I've got a chip on my shoulder about it all. But it's like,
Wow.
it's, but I mean, we've just sat here and talked about how good it is. And like the key thing I want to mention here is how different it is, how colorful, how like dynamic, how unique. And that's what happens when you change up your leadership a little bit and get so many different perspectives and perspectives that you don't hear from a lot. And yeah, there are pieces of this that I don't literally relate to. I'm not a Canadian resident. I'm not like, I don't have any like immigration backstory other than like people further back in my family. But like it's still extremely relatable, and I would hope too for people like you said up top about like you don't have to be like a girl to
No,
relate to this. Like it I feel it finds a way to get to you one way or another. So yeah. Why do
absolutely.
you think I do have a question. I don't want to like move on too quick before if
No,
you
no,
have a
go
thought.
for it.
Um why do you think they chose 2002, and what do you think that how do you think that like influenced or changed the story?
Oh, I'm guessing, I guess I just kind of figured that that would be either A, when Domishi was in like the beginning of high school or the end of junior high, or B, if they just went for like, when was the, I guess not quite the peak of boy bands, because I would guess the peak of boy bands was probably like 2000. Yeah. What do you
Do
think?
you think the boy band thing came first and it was like time to match that, or time first and that was of its time?
Not necessarily. I think, yeah, I assumed that it was just a function of like Domishi remembering her own adolescence and then
Mhm.
dropping the movie there. Is there like a, do you know the answer? Is there like a,
I
okay.
assume it's that too, but
Yeah.
I've been thinking about like how fun it is. I mean, that's another thing that I relate to because it aligns pretty closely to what my experience was at that time. I
Mhm.
think I was a little younger, but like it's still applicable. Um, but yeah, I'm just curious. Like it is fun to see that time depicted. I feel like it's the start of that. Like we're getting into that point where like our adolescence is now vintage. So we're
Yeah.
starting to see that now like pop up more and more. And it is a little weird, but it's fun too. So yeah, I've just been thinking of like how did that contribute to the movie? Do you think like this movie had to take place during that time? I guess to be what it is, yes, because of like the culture references, but I'm just curious because it is like, so not all Pixar movies or animated movies or movies in general like tell you it is this year, it is this time, like this is
Sure.
where we're at. And this kind of goes out of its way to be like the year is 2002. So I'm just curious if that like sparked anything for you or
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, no, I think just it probably made it a more personal story for her to tell.
yeah,
Um,
I like.
yeah, me too. Hey, this is a four quadrant movie for me. I'm trying to remember what I described as the four quadrants of movies for me. I think like colorful is definitely one.
Yes.
Because I'm a 5-year-old. You have to cover a lot of ground. You can't be locked into one location. Big check. We get to see a lot of locations around Toronto in this one. Um, I think I think I went Jimmy V for the other two. I think I said you have to laugh and you have to cry. I mean, huge check. Like all four across the
Yeah.
board on that.
Yeah. It's got heart. It's got laughter. It's got got everything. And I've said this so many times, but it's unique, it's different, it's refreshing, it's something totally new. And especially now when things are so often just like regurgitating things we've already seen and experienced and just finding new ways to do the same thing. It just is so refreshing to see something so genuine.
Yeah, it's exactly what I want to see more of from Disney and from Pixar and from all
Yes.
movies. It's truly original. It's got a distinct, great personality. Like more of this, please, so that we can get further away from regression to the mean. We're
Yeah.
running out of time. So yeah, anything else? Any final comments?
Oh, one thing I feel like I should mention obligatory is periods.
Oh yeah.
Like everybody kind of like I've heard people kind of like throw their hands up at this movie and be like, "Oh, that's the animated movie about a girl getting her period." And number one, so what if it was? I think that is so exciting, and I love that they embrace it. Number two, it's obviously so much more than that. And do I have a number three? I don't know, but um, girl power. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's the same thing that I mentioned at the beginning where it's like not specifically having been a tween girl didn't impact my enjoyment of this movie. Like it's coming from such an emotionally resonant place. It is such a personal story. It's interesting to me that when you tell a story that's truly personal and has emotions that like you felt so deeply,
Yeah.
suddenly that's when people are going to be suddenly that's when people are going to relate to it. When you're trying to make something generic that appeals to everybody, like I
Yes.
think you're going to miss the mark every single time. Like the core of this is to do something that was true to you, and she did. And so like I've never had a period, but I was able to like well, now I understand exactly what it is to be a woman. No, I like uh was able to empathize, and like those
Yeah.
moments obviously are probably more relatable if you have experienced getting your first period, but yeah, it didn't take me out of it. It still was like a great story, and it's look, it's frankly it's ridiculous that people are up in arms about the fact that an animated movie is talking about periods. Like we talked about this one last night. It's like, do you not want your daughter to know it's going to happen? Do you want her to be
Yeah.
terrified the first time it happens? Like, shouldn't we be trying to normalize this a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, and it did feel that way, like, the way that she just, like, out of nowhere turns into a panda and is like, "What is this? Wait, now I have to deal with this?" And then you talk to your mom's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, this has happened to all the women in our family, and now this is a part of your life forever." And it's like, What?" Like, and it feels like that. It's like, I'm hairy, I'm smelly, I'm big, I'm growing, these weird things are happening, and I'm bleeding also, like, it's like, ugh, I'm disgusting, I'm a monster, like, and it's just like, what a fun way to take that experience and, like, subvert it, and then also, like, make it so personable and, like, I don't know, turn it into something new. I
Well,
think it's beautiful.
you listing all this adjectives right now made me want an updated version of the Seven Dwarfs. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. This was great. I'll see you in 15 seconds after I open the door and walk into the kitchen. This has
Can't
been
wait.
Nerdy for 30. Send us an email. You know the address. If you don't send us an email. See you next week. Bye.